Bairro Alto is a central district of the city of Lisbon, the Portuguese capital. Unlike many of the civil parishes of Lisbon, this region can be commonly explained as a loose association of neighbourhoods, with no formal local political authority but social and historical significance to the urban community of Lisbon. The Bairro or neighbourhood resulted from urban expansion in the 16th century, forming outside the walls of the historical city, and is characterized by an almost orthogonal tract. It is a fundamental quarter of Lisbon, organized into a hierarchical scheme of roads and lanes. The roads, the structural axis, run perpendicular to the river. And the lanes, or secondary axis, cut parallel to the river. The matrix of allotments reflects the persistent use of the medieval layout. The division and multiplication of this module had its origin in the variations of the architectural typology. The space constructed is dominated by living spaces implanted in long narrow lots, of 3 to 4 stories in height, with asymmetric facades consisting of windows along the various stories and staircases along the lateral flanks. Although less representative, the Pombalin-era buildings are common, essentially introducing modifications to the level of the four-section aids composition. Although there are many typological variations to the facade designs, certain elements are repeated, such as the corners, bay and sill windows, eaves and attics, securing a homogeneous urbanized front. History. The Bairro Alto was born as a response to the social and economic transformation in Lisbon in the second half of the 15th century. Commercial development caused the growth in the population, and an associated expansion of construction within the medieval walled city. It was this phenomenon that resulted in the urbanization process of the Bairro Alto district, in 2 distinct phases. The first phase began in 1487, after the death of Gdulhar Pala II, an influential figure in the kingdom. His widow transferred land situated on the western limit of the city to the king's equerry, Philippe Gona's section Alves. The land rights for these lands were sold in 1498 to the nobleman Luís de Attribution. Between 1499 and 1502 various royal letters, signed by King Manuel, indicated that there was a need to demolish the balconies and verandas that occupied public spaces in the district. This was part of a package of legislative reforms issued to improve the image of the city. A similar royal charter in 1500, was issued with the objective of transforming the free lands that still existed with the old walls. These initiatives lead to the first urbanization, named Vila Nova do Olival, situated around the old convent of the Trinity, using a series of administrative tools and proceedings that would, later, be used in the creation of the Bairro Alto. In 1505, the construction of the new royal palace, resulted in the move of the court to the riverfront, and extended the city until the Quai du Sodre copyright. Around 1513, the first move to divide the lands of the Bairro Alto began, under the approval of Lopo Attribution. Bartolomeu de Andrade and his wife Francisca Cordova received permission to section off plots for the construction of houses. The new urbanization would be designated Vila Nova de Andrade. After the establishment of a grid network of roads, the first houses began to be built, with the majority popping up south of the Portas de Santa Catarina in 1514. The remainder of the homes also began occupying plots along Rua das Flores, Rua do Cabo, Rua do Castelo, the consecutively named Rua Primeira, Segunda and Terceira, in addition to the Rua da Barroca do Mar. By 1527, there were a total of 408 buildings in the area, totaling 1,600 inhabitants. During the 1530s, the agglomeration began to spread towards the old Estrada de Santos, tracing or following to the north of this route, where it encountered Rua da Rosa, Rua da Atalaya, Rua dos Califates, Rua das Garves, Rua do Norte and Rua de Zar Pão do Rock. The 1531 earthquake resulted in a need to increase the number of residential homes, speeding the growth of the Bairro. The first Jesuits arrived in Portugal in 1540. In 1551, the civil parishes of Martires and Loreto included 2464 homes and 20,132 inhabitants. The second phase of urbanization in the Bairro Alto began around 1553, with the implantation of the Society of Jesus in the civil parish of Sao Paulo Roque, initiating a period of polarized growth, due to their presence. At that time, the zone to the north of Estrada de Santos began being referred to as the Bairro Alto de Sao Paulo Roque. This new phase, growth extended from Sao Paulo Roque until the terrains of the Palace of the Counts of Ovins to the north, limited by the Rua de Sao Paulo Boaventura, Rua do Loureiro, Rua da Cruz and Rua Formosa. In 1559, the civil parish of Santa Catarina was created. Less than a decade later, the Lago de Sao Paulo Roque was formed, and the beginning of the construction of new church and residences of the Society of Jesus were initiated. The enlargement of the route between the Portas de Catarina and Lago de Sao Paulo Roque would occur in 1569, becoming known as the Rua Larga de Sao Paulo Roque. The civil parish of Encana Picavolt Paulo was formed in 1679. Although the Bairro was not significantly affected by the 1755 Lisbon earthquake, the Marquis of Pombal developed plans to restructure the urban fabric between the Bairro Alto and Baixa, which included standardizing the lagos, squares and roads. Between 1760 and 1780, was the beginning of the renovation-remodeling of the roads Rua de Sao Paulo Roque, Rua de Correios and Rua do Sao Copyright Culo, that included the widening of the routes and construction of new buildings. Around the 19th century, the northern limits of the Bairro, including the zone around Sao Paulo Pedro de Alcacentara up to Provincipe Real were delimited. The area was consolidated with the construction of a group of diverse buildings and specifically rental properties. The block that existed between Rua da Rosa and the Travessa do Tijolo came to condition activity in the neighbourhood, including the establishment of various newspapers, of which O Bola still remains. In 1880, the municipal council decided to widen the Rua dos Moinhos do Vento, expropriating lands and buildings that restricted its expansion. In 1881, lots pertaining to the Count of Sour in the Alto do Longo area of the Bairro were opened to the public. This zone maintained a semi-rural character, with single-story houses and courtyards, until the alteration of Rua de Pedro V, when the construction of 4- and 5-story homes came to eliminate these early residences. In 1887 the Caixa Geralda de Precubitos was installed in the Palace of Sobral. Republic the old Travessa da Esla became known as Rua Luizar Todi in 1917. In the middle of the 20th century, the Instituto do Vinho do Porto installed itself in the Palace of Ludovice, in a project under the architect Jorge Sagrado. The creation of the Gabinete Copyright Cnico do Bairro Alto in 1989, and the beginning of a city council policy on urban rehabilitation and renewal. In the last decades of the 20th century, there was a significant socio-cultural dynamic in the area, as a great part of the nightlife became dependent on the restaurants and bars of the quarter. Lisbon's city council made extensive remodeling and repairs to the district, resulting in the opening of new restaurants, clubs and trendy shops. While cars were restricted in the district, many young people began to live in the Bairro. It is generally a youth-oriented heart of the subculture and nightlife of Lisbon. In 2002 some arteries in the Bairro were restricted to pedestrian traffic. A 2004 dispatch from the president of the IPPAR, dated November 11, determined the opening of a process to classify the district as architecturally significant. From November 1, 2008, many of the bars in Bairro Alto were forced to close their doors at 2 a.m., due to noise complaints. However, after August 1, 2009, this restriction was alleviated with an extension to 3 a.m., which also included the increase in the number of police officers assigned to the district, to patrol the streets. Around this time, the City Council approved a €1.2 million investment project to improve the area's physical appearance and improve security, as well as tackling the excessive graffiti problem. Geography. The Bairro Alto district is generally delimited in the south by the color section Ada do Combro and Rua do Lorito, west by Rua de Ozar Copyright Culo, north by Rua de Pedro V and east by Rua da Miserica Cube da Dia and Rua de Sao Paulo Pedro de Alcacentara. It is, topographically, a plateau with medium elevation of 76 meters terminating in the north, with accentuated slope towards the south. The soils consist of primarily a mixture of sandstone and grit, with clays. Although central to Lisbon, it is normally identified by a different urban nucleus. To the south, running contiguous with the Bairro, is Bica, a zone between the Bica and Alecrim rivers, and the area of Carta which developed at the same time as the Bairro Alto, but was completely transformed by the 1755 earthquake. In the east is the Chiado, Misorica cubed RDIA, Lago da Trindade and Zao do Pedro de Alcacententara. A connection that existed between Bairro Alto and Chiado from the 16th century, was the medieval wall, identifiable by the Cala section Ada do Combro, Rua do Lorito and Rua Garrett, which was the principal exit gate to the west, through the gates of Santa Catarina. Immediately around this is the prosection a Lua Esta Carma Micronas and the Lago do Chiado, and specifically the iconic church of Nossa Senhora do Lorito and the Cafá copyrighted Brasileira. To the north, at the end of Rua da Misorica cubed RDIA is the Lago Trindade Calho, where the church of Zao Rock and Lisbon Misorica cubed RDIA are located. From here it is the beginning of Rua de Zao Pedro de Alcacententara, characterized by structures in a romantic architectural style and extending to the north until Rua de Pedro V, defined by the iconic garden lookout of Zao Pedro de Alcacententara. And still, the Ascensor of Glac cubed rear connects to the prosection dos Restauradores and Avenida da Liberdade. To the west, immediately near the frontier defined by Rua de Ozar copyright Culo and the zone delimited to the south by Rua de Zao Bento and north by Rua da Escalapolita copyright Cnica, the Garden of the Prince Royal, the Academy of Sciences building, the Church of Santa Catarina, the Convento dos Paulistas and Palacio Pombal. Bairro Alto is characterized by orthogonal blocks, sometimes rectangular, with a proportion of 2 lots wide by 6 or 8 lots in length, with many of the length dimensions accompanying the roads, while the shorter dimensions following the lanes. This spatial configuration is not fixed completely within the district. For example, north of the Travessa da Queimada, the blocks, although maintaining a rectangular form, are of different dimensions, with the laneway side representing those of longer length. This new orientation reflects the more open area of Zao Rock, associated with the Casa Professor dos Jesuitas, and marks the transition into the second phase of the Bairro's urbanization. The medium base for these lots is based on the medieval blocks known as Carpoundo, an agricultural measure representing a lot with 60 palms length by 30 palms wide, equivalent to 13.2 6.6 meters. It is this model that guides the blocks where the majority of the 16th and 17th century buildings are located. In a few cases, there are also Mirio Carpoundo configurations, destined for those of the population with less financial resources. Further, there are rare instances in the district where one lot may encompass an entire block, such as the Palace of Andrade and the Palace Ludovice. During the Pombalin era, there was an increase in the number of multiple lots with the standard dimensions. The large occupation rate in the 17th and 18th century originated in the changes to the dimensions of these blocks. Many of the buildings were expanded, both in height, in addition to size. It is this form that predominates the Bairro, which is highly dense, somber and where only the upper floors actually receive an exposure to direct sunlight. The design of the roadways that run through the Bairro Alto consists of a hierarchy of structural roads, oriented north to south in the direction of the Tagus River, and secondary lanes, perpendicular to the roads, running east to west. The hierarchy of these routes are homogeneous in scale, with little variation in size in roads or lanes, a characteristic that is missing from the zones adjacent to the Bairro Alto, preserving an intimacy and unique character. One road, the Rua da Rosa, runs through the Bairro from one extreme to the other, dividing the neighbourhood in half, and along with the Rua do Pereira da Rosa, Travessa dos Inglesinhos and Travessa da Queimada, divide the Bairro in 4 distinct zones, reflecting different phases of urbanization. It is in the zone east of Rua da Rosa that the orthogonal design of the Bairro is more perceptible. The zone west of the neighbourhood, which initially represented the periphery of the city, is more heterogeneous, and where the majority of the monumental buildings were constructed. Situated on the Travessa dos Inglesinhos and Rua dos Caetanos is the old Convento e Cola copyright Bairro dos Inglesinhos, Convento dos Caetanos, Convent of the Caetanos, home to the National Conservatory, and to the southeast limit, the Palácio Maramola Pondo. Architecture. In addition to being formed in an orthogonal layout, the construction in the Bairro Alto used new construction techniques for the time, the transition from buildings built in wood to those completed in stone masonry. The older homes in the Bairro, dating from the 16th and 17th centuries, are characteristically two types: low buildings with 2 stories, square, asymmetric with small windows and sills, and buildings that were long and narrow, consisting of 3 floors with windows, balconies and aligned spans. The first type, from the rural architectural tradition, were generally substituted for the second, with examples surviving to this day. The second type, which are more common, are, nonetheless, infrequent with the exception existing along the Rua da Atalaya. From the natural typological evolution, and growth in the resident population during the 17th century, each of these types served the necessities of its inhabitants, and as a result, there were alterations to the layouts and four-section adders over time. Although the 1755 earthquake did not result in great damage to the Bairro, there are examples of Pombalin-era frame system employed in some of these buildings. The Pombalin building of the period is characterized by a 4-story block with differentiated windows. The four-section aid is recognized by a symmetry made possible by a central staircase, with 2 opposite sets, and the windows in the mansard roofs. By the beginning of the 19th century, the Pombalin style gave way to a simplification and enhancement of the Pombalin-era buildings. While, generally, the Gamaliero style reinforcement of the buildings is not common, many of the Pombalin buildings were redesigned in keeping with the design aesthetic of the time. The construction of palacettes in this Romanticism style resulted from a collage of the French aesthetic influences, identified primarily in the north and east of Bairro Alto, and especially in the area of São Paulo Pedro de Alcacentara, where the Palacete Laranjeiras is the best example. This was a period that emphasized the four-section aid of the buildings, with large verandas. They present a strong characteristic of the four-section aid, with protruding balconies, fine gratings, frame spans over worked masonry and the application of curved lines, especially in the design of courtyards and windows along street corners. At the same time, some buildings were constructed to house workers, organized into villages or in courtyards, such as the Palácio do Tijolo. These were multifamily buildings, usually 2 to 3 stories in height, with a high occupancy and little space. Architectural influences from the 20th century are limited, and restricted to a few points. See also, Ephemeral Museum, located in Bairro Alto. References, notes. Sources: Castilho, Jaleo, Lisboa Antiga, Bairro Alto 3, Lisbon, Portugal, Horta Correa, José Copyright Eduardo, Arquitectura, Manierismo e Estilo Carpando, Histocubed Rio da Arte em Portugal, O Manierismo 7, Lisbon, Portugal, Publicar Picavolt Micronas Alpha, pages 93-136, Neves, Branca das, ed., B.A., Recuperina Picavolt Pound OE Rebelia Picavolt Pound O Gabint para Recuperina Picavolt Pound O do Bairro Alto do Departamento de Conserva Picavolt Pound O Dia Dia Facaios da Car Cent Mara Municipal de Lisboa, Lisbon, Portugal, Car Pound Mara Municipal de Lisboa, Cabrita, Anta. Cube Nia Race, Manual de Apoio Rebelia Picavolt Pound O Dosa Dia Facaios do Bairro Alto, Lisbon, Portugal, Car Pound Mara Municipal de Lisboa, Carita, Ha Copyright LDER, Bairro Alto, Tipologias e Modos Arquitecta Cubed Nicos, Lisbon, Portugal, Horta Correa, José Copyright Eduardo, Arquitectura Portuguesa. Renascimento, Manierismo, Estilo Carpando, Lisbon, Portugal, Editorial Pricina Section A, Collado, Maria Ferreira, Bartolmeixas, Lisboa, Freguesia de Santa Catarina e Freguesia da Encana Picavolt o Bairro Alto, Lisbon, Portugal, Lisbon 94, Roteiro Cultural dos Parishes e Villas da Azar Copyright Team Macalina, Lisbon, Portugal, 1994, Character, Helder, o Bairro Alto e a Legisla Picavolt o Urbana para Lisbon no Zar Copyright CS 16 e 17, Lisboa Iluminista e o seu Tempo, Lisbon, Portugal, Rosa, Walter, A Cidade Portuguesa, Histocubed Ria da Arte Portuguesa 3, Lisbon, Portugal, Carculo de Leitores, pages 233 a €323, Character, Helder. Lisboa Manuelina e forma Picavolt o de Modelos Urbanos Sticos da Permelpica Moderna, Lisbon, Portugal, Teixeira, Manuel C. Valla, Margarida, o Urbanismo Português, Zar Copyright CS 13 a 18, Lisbon, Portugal, Frena Section A, José Copyright Augusto, Lisboa, Urbanismo e Arquitectura, Lisbon, Portugal, Livros Horizonte, AAVV, ed., Universo Urbanístico Português 1415-1822, Actas do Cola Cubed Quio Internacional 1999, Lisbon, Portugal, CNCDP.